Hey folks, welcome to Narratives. Narratives is a podcast exploring the ways in which the world is better than in the past, the ways it is worse, and the paths towards a better, more definite vision of the future. I'm your host, Will Jarvis, and I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. I hope you enjoy it. You can find show notes, transcripts, and videos at narrativespodcast.com.
Well, Ben, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. I'm as I mentioned earlier, I'm slightly overwhelmed, but other than that, things are going well.
Yeah, being a founder is no joke, man. They don't tell you this, in the founder school we all go to before you get things started, right?
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So something that I've realized is that I think that starting any organization is the same regardless of like what the form of that organization is. So it's like everybody knows that like starting a company, you sort of like roughly go through the same things. But I think that starting a nonprofit is the same thing, and which is also the same thing as starting an academic lab. Because I know a number of people who are starting academic labs, and it's like the exact same process set of things where you basically have to like somehow bootstrap legitimacy for this thing that has no track record.
Yes.
So
and anyway. How do you go about this? Yeah, it is a interesting challenge. Well, what do you think's been particularly good for you in bootstrapping legitimacy?
I mean, good for me. I think that having written an obscenely long piece about my entire thought process has actually been pretty good for bootstrapping legitimacy.
Nice.
In the sense of I've clearly at least thought through what I'm doing.
Right.
And I clearly, I might be wrong about it, but I clearly like am not just like making things up. I think that's, this is a thing I think about all the time is like how to bootstrap legitimacy. I don't know, coming on your podcast, right?
Doing the podcast tour, getting your name up beside some different folks that have done some good stuff, and writing your ideas down seems to be important. Writing online, I think that's a really powerful mechanism. Definitely.
The thing that I would say about writing specifically online, specifically as opposed to generically, like writing things that are like very much like, oh, like you're the person who wrote that thing that had like this very particular opinion,
right, is
good. Also, just really truly, it's once you can get a couple of people to be excited about what you're doing, it's like leveraging that, right? So it's like finding program managers by getting like one researcher in a field to take you seriously, and then they like introduce you to other people, and then like that's how you bootstrap legitimacy.
Definitely. No, I think that makes sense. That's a great segue for the audience. Ben, can you talk a little bit about what you're building? It's really, really exciting.
Yes, sorry, I think I got ahead of myself. So I'm building a organization called Speculative Technologies. We're a nonprofit research organization modeled after ARPA, and the sort of mandate that I've set out for us is to build new paradigms in materials and manufacturing. That's sort of like the one-liner about it.
I love that. And I know you spend a lot of time going to conferences, exploring manufacturing and new technologies around material science. Was there an aha moment when you realized there's a lot we can do here that we have not done yet as a species?
I'm not sure if there was an aha moment around that. Can I tell you what there was an aha moment around?
Absolutely.
So the aha moment was like that like in basically all domains there are things that we could be doing that we're not doing, right? So the trick is less to figure out where you can do things that people aren't doing, but to almost like narrow it down. So the aha moment was around the fact that we should be focusing on materials and manufacturing. And that came from this sort of the like basically crystallizing the opinion that again many people may disagree with me on this, that the like biggest sort of like social and economic effects of technologies are all second order effects. And and I can dig into that, but then the technologies that are like most likely to create second order effects are materials and new manufacturing processes. Like every time we create one of those, there's this like ripple of second order effects that happen out in the world.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. The example I point to the most is how, you know, a couple of decades ago, like not too long ago, overpopulation was an existential threat to humanity, right? Like you have the population bomb, and you have basically people worried about this exponential number of people leading to starvation and a cascade of effects that, you know, it's like migrations that would destabilize even developed countries and you know, like really bad things for humanity. And if you look around the world today, we passed the 8 billionth person in the world not too long ago, and like not that much fanfare.
Right.
And that's because overpopulation just like isn't a thing we worry about. And that is in large part thanks to the fact that we invented the Haber-Bosch process, which lets us fix nitrogen from the air and create much more fertilizer than we could just using natural fertilizers. We figured out how to do some amount of genetic engineering. So you had the whole green revolution, and many plants and crops that are much more productive. And then more generally, like we created a lot of technology that have made people a lot more wealthy, which it tends to make people have fewer kids. So between the three of those, these like second order effects of technologies, this existential threat was no longer a problem. So that's like the classic one. And then we can like point to like all these other things, right? Like, you know, it's like we don't really like whales are doing a lot better in large part because we use electricity and natural gas instead of whale oil. Our cities are no longer covered in soot, not because we made really good technology for cleaning soot off of buildings, but because again, we don't use coal for heating and powering factories anymore. Right. Like, and like, I mean, everybody points to the ways in which, you know, like computers have sort of like reconfigured society.
Right.
So anyway, et cetera, the list goes on. But it's all sort of like the social and economic effects are second order effects that were very hard to predict in the first place.
Gotcha. And so these positive second order effects, it sounds like you either think too many people are focusing on software and not enough people are focusing on manufacturing and material science. Is that correct? Or is it just higher leverage to humanity to focus on manufacturing and material science? Or both?
I'm not sure if it's like, I don't know the balance of like absolute number of people.
Right.
But I think that right now there is a lot of work, like the work itself. Like I can't think of a lot of work in, well, even actually, I've rescind that even. There's even a lot of work in computer science that's not being done. I just think that there is like a particularly large amount of work that's not being done in materials and manufacturing, sort of because of institutional constraints.
Gotcha.
And like that's where I see sort of like my highest leverage point being.
Makes sense.
You know, it's like I yeah.
Can you talk about like what are those institutional drag factors that you've noticed that prevent people from making more innovation in these spaces?
So let's see. I guess what I like to do is like walk through the different institutions that we sort of have that are responsible for that we would hope are doing this. So in academia, a lot of the incentives are around doing new things, like really like, and especially new ideas, and like showing that a new idea is feasible.
Gotcha.
So people will come up with like with a new material, right? Or they'll come up with like uh one piece of a manufacturing process, and then they'll say, okay, we did it. I wrote my paper. I'm done.
Ta-da.
Like let's, and then if they try to do sort of like build on it, reviewers are like, well, like, and their peers are like, well, this has been done. This is not new. Why are you doing this? And so what it does is it creates things that like are completely unscalable, or not that they're unscalable, but they require a lot more work to scale. You'll see this all over the place where scaling like materials and manufacturing processes often requires as much research as inventing them in the first place. So that work is not being done in academia. And then, or you get a situation where you have a whole bunch of components, and again, you need to do just as much research to put those components together into a functional system as you do to invent the components in the first place. So that's academia. Two, then we think about startups, and like startups are really great mechanisms for scaling things that you know how to scale, and building products and selling things to customers, right? And like that is a great thing, but the kind of work that I was describing is still really research. There's like really sort of fundamental uncertainties in there, and so it just like does not make a good investment, both because of the levels of uncertainty, not just about like whether it will work, but whether it will like turn into a product even, or like something that you can cap. And additionally, the type of work that you need to do is often creates public goods, whether you like it or not, in the sense of like, if you think of there as being like some very large design space, then like the work, once you say like, okay, like this point in design space is the right point, everybody else can copy that, but it might take like many years and millions of dollars to find that point. And like that's like the opposite of a moat. That's like an anti-moat.
Yes.
And so like between those things and just like the timescales and amount of money involved and the amount of value you can capture, it means that like doing this work is just not well suited for a venture capital backed startup. And then we might turn to industrial labs as sort of a third and final institution. And you know, it's like this work was in the past done by industrial labs like Bell Labs. They, you know, your classic example, but sort of due to a combination of restructuring of the industry and like a lot of outsourcing of R&D to startups, partially because of that, partially because of just increased investor expectations from the public markets, and third, just in terms of like the companies that sort of have the slack to do really sort of speculative work, being primarily software companies now. You don't have companies doing this sort of work, especially when it would sort of go contrary to their main product line. So they'll do research when it's like, okay, like this will like augment our main product line. But when it's something like, okay, we're going to like reinvent the process by which we make this thing, like they have no incentive to do that. So that is a very long explanation of why this sort of work does not have a home in any institution right now.
Right. That makes sense. And how difficult has it been to convince like philanthropy and funders to fund it? Because it makes sense, right? There's no place that does this right now. And it's like, it is speculative. It's speculative. It's in the name, right? It's speculative technologies. It's like, we're not sure we're going to find something. We'll probably find something out there. We're not exactly sure what it's going to be. How it's like, that sounds like a difficult pitch. I just finished fundraising and it was pretty hard to fundraise. And we had this pretty concrete thing we're selling. You know what I mean? It sounds like a pretty difficult thing to go out there and do, but you've been successful at it. Can you talk about that process at all and how you think you made that work?
Yeah, I would say I've been somewhat successful. I mean, I need to be more successful in order to sort of achieve our goals. Let's call a spade a spade. I mean, right now, our funding has come from very generous donors who kind of get it already.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it was not because they did not give us money because I convinced them that this was a problem worth addressing.
Gotcha.
I like that. That is that. I would actually say, like, that's sort of like the biggest next thing that I need to do is really, like, start trying to convince people of this.
Gotcha.
And so in that sense, it was a matter of finding funders who already realized that this was an issue worth tackling, and doing the slightly easier argument of, like, the way that I'm proposing to tackle it has a chance of succeeding.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So that's what they're betting on.
Makes sense. So you start with initial. I think there's a good lesson here, though. Initially, you start with a group of core people who are sympathetic to what you're building, and you come to them and say, "Hey, like, I've got this really good plan to go out there and try and solve this. What do you think about this plan? Like, would you be interested in supporting this?" And then you bootstrap to start convincing people as you build success over time.
Yeah, I assume it's similar to building a startup, right? Like, you're going to go,
yeah.
Your initial customers are going to be the ones that, like, get it.
Exactly.
And then once they start sort of, like, having a lot of success and getting the testimonials, then maybe you'll start to convince other people who right now are skeptical. But, like, then once you show them momentum,
exactly.
Yeah,
you get these early adopters, right? And then you can move into, like, the more general public over time as you are successful.
See, building things, building new organizations is the same, regardless of the domain.
This is very wise. It's a wise observation. I think it's definitely on the money. So, Ben, out of my curiosity, I want to know, how are you thinking about finding program managers? And can you talk about what the program manager role looks like? They are program managers, right? I'm using the right term there.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure that that's exactly the right title. That may change in the future, but, like, DARPA calls them program managers. That seems like a reasonable name. So the problem with it is that they're PMs. You also have product managers and project managers. And all three of these roles are wildly different. So anyway, how do I go about finding them? So the question is how do I go about finding them?
So can you describe the role, and then we can talk about like, ideal who slots in there and like that.
So the role is effectively to be kind of like the mini CEO of a specific of a program. And what I mean by a program is a roughly 5-year thing that starts off by doing a lot of planning around basically, like, what projects need to happen within this program umbrella, who's going to be doing those projects, like, why are we doing this whole thing in the first place, what's going to happen at the end of this thing, and, like, what are the risks. Right now, our rough framework is trying to first, like, go through and answer the questions in the Hellmeyer Catechism, which is like, what are you trying to do? Describe it with zero jargon. 2, how is it done today? I may be mixing up the order on these. 3, what is new in what you're trying to do. 4, who cares? 5, what are the risks? 6, how long will it take? And 7, how much will it cost? I may have missed one. We could put in the show notes.
Yeah.
But anyway, like just roughly answer those questions. Anyway, so like you plan it, and then the program manager's job is to like figure that out, and then figure out like who at other organizations we could work with, give money to, in order to work on separate projects that all sort of like have to work together towards building, a final goal. So that's the role. And then the way that I go about finding them, frankly, is mostly some combination of telling people I know, like, hey, I'm looking for people who might have really ambitious and good program ideas.
Yes.
Introduce them to me. And then 2, kind of having a very like rough sense of a program that might fit into the organization.
Gotcha.
Reading a bunch of papers in that area, and then contacting the authors and being like, hey, I read your paper. I'm really interested in like, just like what you think about this more broadly. Do you think that there's room for a program there? And then if they're like, oh yeah, like there might be room for a program there, then I'm like, oh, cool. Like, do you know anybody who might be really great at running that? And then, it's like they'll introduce me to other people. It's like, and then point me to other papers, and then you wash, rinse, and repeat.
Makes sense. And are there any characteristics you found that make people successful in these types of roles? Are they kind of like insider outsiders? Like, do they know the field well, but they're not exactly, they fit the mold of like your average like person who ends up as a tenure professor in academia? Yeah, what kind of characteristics do these people have?
Yeah. So like full disclosure, I'm still figuring this out. So
nice.
I can tell you some like
TBD.
I'll tell you my current I can tell you my current hypotheses. I just like want this to have like high epistemic uncertainty about what I'm about to say. So I think whenever someone's doing one of these programs, it's going to be like broader than any one person can have done, but they should have like some strong experience in like at least one piece of what the program will be.
I see.
They need to have done like some amount of like real physical research. And so what I say is like, they don't need to have a PhD, but you need to have done something like that, right? Where you're like, like what it is like to suffer while trying to get the like real world to yield up its secrets, in doing something that nobody's ever done before, right? So it's like, you don't, that's like pretty hard requirement. And then beyond that, there's like some combination of like curiosity, but like the curiosity of a scientist and critical thinking of a scientist combined with like the hustle of the hustle and ambition of a startup founder with like a giant dash of epistemic humility is kind of like the general recipe.
That's awesome. That sounds hard to find.
So yeah, it's really hard.
Not impossible, which is good. Not possible. Yeah. But like it sounds, is most of your job will it end up being recruiting at the end of the day?
I think so. I mean, unless someone that ends up being someone else's job. Right. Like, and again, similar other things that are the same with startups. Right. Like at the end of the day, the founder's job ends up being just like recruiting and fundraising, for the most part. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would estimate that there's like under 10,000 of these people in the world. Like that's kind of like my rough.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
My rough hunch.
Yeah. It's much better than 1,000 though.
It is much better than 1,000. I suspect there's more than 1,000. And I suspect to some extent it can be trained. Like I
think so?
don't. Yeah, I think, and that's kind of like the hope with building a new institutional structure, right? Is that like at first the only people that you can get are the ones who like through some set of luck are like good for that institution, but eventually like institutions kind of generate people who are good for them. Like
Yes.
I don't know, like I would argue that because startups became such a big thing, there are more people who would make good founders in the world than
Right.
than there were like in the 1980s.
Yeah, Matt Clifford talks about that. You know, what do his question always is in a given country, what do the ambitious people do? You know, if you're in Singapore,
yeah, exactly.
civil service or something like that, and then
and
perhaps one day in Ben Reinhardt's stand, you know, people go and they become program managers. That's what high-sized people do.
I agree with Matt on most. Like by default, I agree with Matt on things. So
smart guy.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
That's cool. So Ben, other than fundraising and recruiting and everything and trying to do everything all at once, which, you know, building new orgs is, you know, what is the single biggest challenge you faced so far that if you could wave your magic wand and alleviate, what would that be?
Besides fundraising and recruiting, I have to go like pretty far down my my priority list. Let's biggest challenge. I mean, so like, I guess like an interesting, like this is not particularly, and I guess kind of is tied to those, and is like a broader question of like, how do you know that research is good? Like that challenge, right? Which is like both sounds incredibly philosophical, but then is also like how will we, like the question of like how will we know when we're successful, right? Like what will that actually look like? And then on top of that, is there any way to get leading indicators of the fact that we're doing good work, right?
Yes.
Because it's like you can see throughout history, like both like inventors and scientists who don't see the impact of their work until after they're dead, right?
Yeah.
And that's like that is both hard to course correct on and also hard to convince other people that we're doing a good job if that's the case.
Yes.
So really trying to figure out like how do you judge yourself is I think a big challenge.
It's a huge challenge in the research space. Do you have any sense of like how to go about, you know, measuring these things? You know, I talked to Don Braben a long time ago. He had some way of doing which I cannot quite recall. Just checking in with people and if they're still like following interesting paths or something. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, right now the hunch we're acting off of is sort of tied up in these roadmaps of like, here's our hypothesis about like what the things that we would want to hit in order to achieve this technology, and sort of like almost like really going deep on not necessarily a justification, but like a reasoning behind all of it to ourselves. So you can say like, okay, like we think that this technology is worth building because it will have like these general purpose, because like it will have like these general purpose uses. You could potentially imagine a future where people could do this, and then like here are the biggest risks and the things that we need to do to show that these are not risks are like XYZ. And so it's almost like kind of just building up this like really big causal chain. And I think at some point you sort of just need to say like, okay, like, are we executing on this causal chain? Yes, no. How are things going? But I think it's really hard. And it's like, I might almost push back against the idea of like measurement per se.
Got it.
in the sense that like I think that it measurement involves like somehow making like a universally transferable sense of something.
Yes.
And I think almost, again, this is not something that many people would agree with, but I think that a thing that we've lost and that we need to do is kind of build like these like chains of trust where it's like, okay, like I build up trust with a program manager, they build up trust with scientists, the scientists build up trust with each other, and then like get everybody to be really honest and just sort of say like, like, is this working? Is this stupid?
Right.
And go from that. And it's like, that's, I realize, like, deeply unsatisfying to everybody, including myself. But I think like, I think this is a thing that has sort of been lost and like on the margin. We need to do more.
Well, it does seem like a lot is lost if you just get obsessed with the free rider problem and you're, and all you're trying to track is not getting, like on the margin, someone running off with the money or something like that.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
The optimal number of crackpots and frauds is not zero.
Exactly. It's something like, so we're talking about Matt Clifford earlier, and one of the things he mentioned on how he can identify one of his startups and Entrepreneur First is doing really well is the number of positive surprises that the frequency. Do you think something like that might work as well? It's not like so much that hard metrics, but wow, like interesting things are happening quickly.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good one. And another one, so I'm not sure if you know this, I actually worked for Matt.
Really? No way.
I worked for Matt in 2019. I worked at Entrepreneur First in Singapore. So I was awesome. Like intimately involved in this question of like, how do we know if founders are doing well?
Yeah.
So like another sort of like leading indicator that actually was pretty strong was like just like how much they get done.
Interesting.
And I'm actually, like now that you bring that up, like I think that that's actually a pretty good indicator, even in science. Sorry, not science, but like in like technology research, because like I think I want to exclude the kind of like Einstein going off and like spending 12 years figuring out general relativity, right? So it's like there definitely are domains where you want to see people just like it is possible for people to just go off and solve Fermat's last theorem or whatever, in a room. I don't think that we're there. I think that what you want to see when you're doing kind of experimental building focused research is still just like, oh, like tried this, didn't work, doing this other thing, I had this idea, I executed on it, it was a bad idea, right? Like you want to see that iteration speed, and it doesn't necessarily mean like pivoting, it just means like some like level of activity.
Yes, a lot's happening. Matt Friedman described this to me as he said, Will, you've got like a very low powered flashlight and you're running around in a dark room looking for treasure, and the only thing lever you have is moving around faster. It's like, and that's how you should think about finding product market fit, which is maybe related.
Yeah, I think it's not quite, it's not exactly the same the same analogy, but I think that there really is something to just like doing smart things, like and like I almost think that like planning itself can be one of those things that you're doing, right? So if you're like I wrote down like these 5 possible scenarios and like ruled like these 2 out and talked to these 2 people about them, right?
Yes, I
would look at that and say like, oh yeah, like that's great.
That's good. Absolutely.
I think
not just flailing about or something.
Yeah, look, an analogy that Peter van Hendenberg, I'm butchering his name, he runs Ink and Switch, gave me that I loved is this term building rudder, which is from boating, which I don't do at all, but like unless you have like water jets on the front of your boat, you can't turn unless you're moving.
Interesting.
Right. So like in order to be able to change direction in a boat,
That's
you
good.
need to move at all. So it's like something around that
That's really good.
is really important. But
Great
at the same time, like, right, like it's like, but the tension there is like, how do you like what is like good action versus like flailing action, right?
Yes.
And that I don't know how to discriminate that.
Maybe it's like obscenity. You kind of know it when you see it or something like that, which is not helpful, but like to describe on a podcast, but perhaps is true.
Yeah, I think so. But like I'm kind of optimistic and confident that if we pay attention, it might be possible to come up with like better theories about
Gotcha.
about how that works.
What's making people successful?
Yeah.
Ben, you're a super smart guy. Well, why pick this problem in particular? I've realized I've never asked you this.
Oh,
you know, like, you got a lot of options, right? You know, you can be a VC, you know, all kinds of different stuff, but this is appealing to
you. So like the really honest answer is because I want there to be more awesome sci-fi shit in the world.
That's awesome.
like that's actually it. It's like that's what I want to happen. And it's like, I've managed to convince myself that this is the best way that like given
personally can do it,
like given my set of skills can try to make that happen.
That's great.
Frankly,
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
there's nothing more profound to it.
No, that's great. That's great. And for you personally, are there any technologies you are super jazzed about that you think have just been overlooked?
I mean, my sort of big one is general purpose telerobotics. So basically, the possibility of through some system, you could imagine like putting on a headset and going into some contraption, basically being able to seamlessly act through a robot anywhere in the world. So the reason for that is some combination of a belief that I think like automation like general purpose automation is going to be much harder than many people think it is. And the fact that it's not just sort of like automation, but is actually like allows people to effectively teleport. So like
pretty cool.
Something that really would excite me is like a scientific lab where you basically have collaborators all over the world working together 24/7. So you have cool. like different shifts based on different places in the world, and everybody just is like seamlessly handing off. And that's just like really not even something that people are thinking about automating anytime soon, but is like, yeah. So anyway, that's one.
I like that. And you said something interesting there that, you know, general purpose automations could be much harder than people realize. We were talking to a Facebook email engineer. He works in automation, you know, general purpose automation, or he did at the time. And that's one of the things he mentioned as well. Is like, you don't realize how hard a lot of this stuff is. And we see that even with self-driving cars, it seems like they're always, you know, perennially 5 years away or something.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe we're getting there now.
Yeah. I'm kind of bullish on the cars. You know, it's like, you can ride around in San Francisco in a cruise car.
That's true.
Maybe like not like, yeah, I don't know how well it'll go from city to city, but like, but in terms of like the robotics automation problem, yeah, I think so.
Just hard, just really hard.
Again, like this is a thing. I don't know. I get into arguments about this on Twitter sometimes.
Oh yeah,
and you know, it's like people who have some amount of training in an area are often the ones who are like the least able to predict a paradigm shift. So, you know, It's like I could be completely wrong about this, but it's just like I don't see the mechanism by which a lot of the advances that we're seeing in AI on computers, which really depends on like truly obscene amounts of data. I don't see that translating into the physical world without some sort of discovery about how to do things differently.
Gotcha. Something like, I think you mentioned this to me, but when we were having coffee, but something where there just isn't the same data layer that we have for text for the real world.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's we just don't, it's like literally everything that goes on in a computer can become data for training, for training like a large language model or something, but we don't have anything like that in the real world, right? So it's like, hopefully I'm wrong, right?
Right.
But
that'd be great. Yeah. And so do you think the effect of large language models are being somewhat overrated right now, like for the next 10 years of human productivity?
I think I think like now we're going beyond my zone of competence, but like
that's fair.
I think like the thing that I would say is like I think like my sort of what I want to make is a very scoped claim, which is that like I think that the effect of large language models on doing things outside of a computer is going to be limited. I think like that's sort of my, like inside of a computer, I have no way of knowing.
Gotcha. Great to know. Yeah. I think that makes sense, and it directionally jives with my thoughts. Ben, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on.
You're welcome.
Speculative Technologies. It's been a ton of fun. Speculative Technologies. What can the audience do? Are you looking for anybody, and are you trying to recruit for anything? Is there anything we can help you with?
Yeah, I mean, like very, very concretely, if you know anybody who wants to donate, that's always appreciated.
Definitely.
Always looking for good program managers. If there is some technology that is currently bottlenecked in materials or manufacturing that you think could be really big if true, get in touch. But definitely. Yeah, and just sort of spread the word. When this airs, the website should be live.
That'd be great. Do you have a domain for it yet?
Yes, it is spec.tech.
Perfect. Love it. That's easy. Easy.
Or speculativetechnologies.org. I think both of them redirect.
Awesome. Love that. Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming on again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Will. It is always a pleasure.
Definitely.
Special thanks to our sponsor, Bismarck Analysis, for the support. Bismarck Analysis creates the Bismarck Brief, a newsletter about intelligence-grade analysis of key industries, organizations, and live players. You can subscribe to Bismarck Brief at brief.bismarckanalysis.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with a new episode of Narratives. Special thanks to Donovan Dorrance, our audio editor. You can check out Donovan's work and music at donovandorrance.com.